Long, long ago, there lived an old farmer and his wife in a house in the mountains, far from the city. Their only neighbor was a wicked, grumpy badger. Every night, the badger would come, enter the farmer's field, and plunder the vegetables and rice that the poor man spent all his time cultivating. Over time, the badger became so excessive that it started to damage not only the field, but also the rest of the farm. The poor, kind-hearted farmer could no longer bear it and decided to put an end to this situation. So, for days and nights, he hid in a secluded part of the garden with a stick in his hand, waiting to catch the badger. However, when this waiting proved fruitless, he decided to set a trap to catch this tyrannical animal. The farmer's suffering and patience finally paid off, and one day, while walking around the farm, he saw the badger had fallen into one of the holes it had dug. The farmer was overjoyed to have caught his enemy. He tied the badger up well, took it home, and when he arrived, he called out to his wife, "I've finally caught that animal called a badger. While I'm working in the field, you keep an eye on it. Don't let it escape. We'll have badger stew for dinner." Saying this, he hung the badger from the ropes it was tied with onto the kitchen shelf and went to the field to work. The badger, hearing that it would be stew for dinner, became anxious. It thought for a long time, searching for a way to escape, but it couldn't think properly while hanging upside down. Just ahead, at the entrance of the barn, the farmer's old wife was threshing barley. The woman looked very old and tired. Her face was covered with wrinkles, her skin was tanned from working under the sun, and she often stopped to wipe the sweat from her forehead with her hand. "Madam," called the badger, "don't you ever get tired of doing such heavy work by yourself at this age? If you like, I can thresh the barley for you. My arms are very strong. You can rest a little." "Thank you," said the old woman, "but if I untie you, you might escape. And what would I tell my husband in the evening if you did?" However, the badger, being a very cunning animal, did not give up, and in its politest, most altruistic voice it said, "Oh, come on. I promise if you untie me, I won't run away. I'll do all the work, and I'll even tie myself back up before your husband comes so he doesn't get angry with you. I'm exhausted from hanging upside down like this. Just let me down for a minute or two. I'd be grateful." The kind-hearted old woman knew no cunning and thought no ill of anyone. It did cross her mind that the badger might be speaking like this to trick her, but she also felt quite sorry for the animal's condition. After all, it had been hanging upside down, tightly bound by its legs for hours, and the ropes must have been cutting its wrists. So the kind and gentle woman believed the animal's words, untied the rope, and lowered it. She gave it a wooden mortar and told the badger to continue threshing the barley while she rested. The badger took the mortar, but instead of starting work as promised, it brought the large wooden pestle down on the woman's neck, knocking her to the ground. Then it killed the woman right there, made a nice stew, and waited for the old farmer to arrive. The old man worked cheerfully that day, thinking that the badger would no longer bother him. The farmer left work at sunset and headed home. He was very tired, but the thought of the badger stew he believed was waiting for him at home cheered him up. It never crossed his mind that the badger might have escaped and ruined everything. Meanwhile, the badger disguised itself as the old woman and met the farmer on the small house's veranda. "You're finally home," it said. "The badger stew is ready, waiting for you on the table." The old man immediately took off his shoes and sat down at the small dining table. He didn't know that what was waiting for him on the table was not badger stew, but stew made from his own wife. As the man began to eat, the badger shed the old woman's clothes and started shouting at the farmer. "The stew you're eating is your wife's stew, old fool. Look, her bones are in the kitchen." Saying this, the badger burst into laughter, ran out the door, and headed towards its den behind the hills. The old man remained frozen in place. He couldn't comprehend what he had seen and heard. When he finally realized what had happened, he was so frightened, so terrified, that he fell to the ground and fainted. When he came to, he sat down and began to cry out of despair. He cried loudly, throwing himself on the ground. The man knew nothing. It was beyond his comprehension that while he was working in the field, thinking he had defeated his enemy, the animal had cooked and eaten his old wife. On top of that, he had eaten stew made from his wife's flesh by the wild animal. Oh my God, he cried, tearing at his hair. In the same mountain, not far from the farmer's house, lived a kind-hearted rabbit. As soon as it heard the old man's cries, it darted out of its burrow and began to run towards the farmer's house to see what was happening and to help its neighbor. When the rabbit heard what had happened, it couldn't believe its ears and was so enraged at the wicked badger that it told the old man not to grieve, and that it would somehow avenge his wife on that terrible badger. The farmer calmed down a little at these words, wiped his tears, and thanked the rabbit for coming to his aid. Seeing the farmer calm, the rabbit went home to find a way to take revenge on the badger. The next day, the weather was quite nice, and the rabbit went out to look for the badger. It wandered through the forest, over the hills, and in the fields, but couldn't find it. So it went to the badger's den, and just as it expected, the badger, fearing the old man's revenge after what it had done, was hiding in its home. The rabbit called out, "What are you doing hiding in your den on such a beautiful day? Come on, let's go graze on those hills." The badger, suspecting nothing due to the rabbit's friendly demeanor, eagerly came out, and going to the hills, away from the farmer's house, seemed like a good idea to it. The rabbit led the badger further and further away. They went to places where the grass was the greenest, sweetest, and longest. Since they had found plenty of grass, they started to pluck some to carry home for winter. After loading as many bundles of grass as they wanted onto their backs, they set off for home. This time, the rabbit asked the badger to go first. They had only gone a little way when the rabbit, with a flint and an iron rod, set fire to the grass on the badger's back, which was walking in front of it. Hearing the sound of the flint, the badger turned around and asked, "What was that crackling sound?" The rabbit said, "Nothing, I just said crack crack to myself, because the name of this mountain is Crack Crack Mountain." As the flames slowly engulfed the dry grass on the badger's back, the badger, hearing the crackling of the grass this time, asked, "And what is this sound?" "Now we've come to Fiery Mountain," replied the rabbit. By now the dry grass was fully ablaze, and the badger could understand it when it smelled the burning grass and fur sticking to its back. It cried out in pain and quickly ran towards its den. The rabbit, chasing after it, soon found the badger writhing in pain in its den. "Ah, what bad luck," said the rabbit. "I swear I don't understand how this happened. Let me go prepare some medicine to heal your burns." The rabbit left, quite pleased, thinking that the badger was already beginning to suffer its punishment. Thought that the badger's suffering was nothing compared to what it deserved. This wild animal, which had killed a poor old woman who trusted it, deserved to suffer more. It went home and prepared an ointment by mixing hot sauces and red peppers. It took this ointment and returned to the badger. It told the badger that this ointment was very healing, and that it should endure the pain, no matter how much it hurt, when applied to its burns. The badger thanked it and asked it to apply the ointment to its burns as soon as possible. When the paste made of hot red pepper touched its already burned back, the badger's pain was indescribable. It rolled from side to side, literally howling and screaming in agony. In this situation, the rabbit thought its revenge plan was starting to succeed. The badger could barely get out of bed for almost a month, but despite the hot pepper ointment, its wounds slowly but surely healed, and it eventually recovered. When the rabbit saw that the badger had recovered, it began to make another plan for the animal to die. One day, it gathered some grass and went to the badger's house to wish it well. While they were talking about trivial things, the rabbit mentioned that it was going fishing and explained how enjoyable fishing was when the weather was nice and the sea was calm. The badger, listening eagerly to the rabbit's stories, forgot its illness and its wounds. It thought how much fun it would have if it went fishing with the rabbit and asked the rabbit to take it along on its next fishing trip. The rabbit, whose wish was already this, did not hesitate to grant the badger's request. It immediately went home and made 2 boats, one of wood and the other of clay. After long efforts, when both boats were finished, the rabbit looked at them and thought that if its plan to kill the badger succeeded, all this trouble would be worth it. When the day came, the rabbit took the badger fishing. It got into the wooden boat itself and gave the clay boat to the badger. The badger, having no idea what was going on, thought it was very kind of the rabbit to give it this brand new boat. Both got into their boats and started to move forward. After moving a little away from the shore, the rabbit suggested to the badger that they race their boats. The badger accepted this fun-looking offer, and they began to row quickly. However, halfway through the race, the badger saw its boat starting to fall apart because the water was softening and eroding the dried clay. It cried out in fear and asked the rabbit for help, but the rabbit, far from helping, did not even stir. It brought its boat closer to the badger, who was now thrashing in fear, and told it that it was getting its just punishment for brutally killing the old woman. The badger drowned shortly after. Then the rabbit raised its oar and hit the badger, burying it along with the clay boat at the bottom of the water. Thus, keeping its promise to the farmer, the rabbit rowed back to shore, ran to the farmer's house, told him everything, and said that its enemy, the badger, was dead. The old farmer, with tears in his eyes, thanked the rabbit. He said that until that day he had not had a single day of peace, and had not slept a single night. But now that his old wife's revenge had been taken, he could breathe a sigh of relief and regain his appetite and sleep. He told the rabbit to stay with him and live in his house, And so from that day on, the old farmer and the rabbit worked and lived together, spending the rest of their days happily